Everybody hold your bowl. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started tonight. First off, we just want to thank y'all so much for letting us be here and inviting us here, and for coming to put up with us for a couple hours throughout the whole weekend, not just tonight. Hopefully we won't talk for a couple hours.
Get comfortable. Everybody get comfortable.
We are Drew and Kelsea. We are from a little bitty town called Childress. It's up in the Texas Panhandle, in between Wichita Falls and Amarillo. If you know what those are, we're around there.
About 30 minutes from Oklahoma.
Yeah, so it's up there. Yeah, you talk about that.
Okay, I don't know if y'all picked up this piece of paper. If you did, great. If not, that's okay too. We just wanted to compile a list of books that we love and enjoy and have read together. Hopefully, there's one for the youngins, and then also some for teens, and then a lot that are just good for everybody. But we just kind of had y'all in mind with your church family and wanting to grow and just different things, and then a lot about relationships. And so this is 12 books that we feel like would feed in really well. Some you've probably heard about too. So anyway, just wanted to pass on that so that y'all can, if any of y'all are readers in here, I definitely love to read. He kind of likes to read. So anyway, books are really good help in that way. So.
In Childress, where we live, we are the youth ministers of the Church of Christ there, and we have been there for about 5 years. We will start year 6 this next week. And we absolutely love our job. In our opinion, youth ministry is the greatest job in the world. We love it. We love hanging out with teenagers. And what we really have a passion for right now as our ministry shifts is speaking to teens about relationships, dating, marriage, what's healthy, what's unhealthy. We have marriage workshops for people who've been married for 20 and 30 and 40 years. But we see a huge hole in the world today that no one is pouring into teenagers and educating them before they get married and as they're dating. And so that's what we like to do. Youth ministry is our main job, but what we love to do on the side is things like this and speak to teenagers. So we're excited to be in Brenham to talk to teenagers, but then also young adults and parents and grandparents, and to a church that sees a growing city and wants to grow as a church with it. We so admire what you guys are doing.
We're really excited to be here, and I think probably what we need to do is talk about ourselves so that we're not just some random people who are like, hey, so here you go. So we're besties. We've been married for 7 years, and we met at Lubbock Christian University, and we met playing a pickup game of basketball, and just ever since we've been good friends and started dating and got married right before our senior year of college. And so we get along really well. We're really passionate about healthy relationships, and so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about all weekend long. And so we're really excited that y'all are here.
And I don't know how y'all feel whenever we listen to other people speak, if it's just like, hi, I'm Drew. So anyway, my first point is this, it's kind of hard to follow along without really knowing who they are. And so we also want to give you some fun facts about us. Kelsea and I, like I said, have been in Childress for 5 years, and we absolutely love that town and the church, and we just feel so blessed to be there. We love going to the movies. I don't know if y'all like going to the movies or not. That's one of our big things. Kelsea grew up in a family that would go to the movies almost weekly, and they would do the whole 9 yards with the popcorn and the Cokes and the candy, and you gotta take out your 401k, that way you can go to the movies. And my family growing up, it was the movie is the treat, and so it's been really cool being with Kelsea, her opening up my eyes to there is this whole new experience when you get the bucket and the drink. So this past week we went on vacation in Oklahoma City, which isn't that far from Childress, and we ate and watched movies. It was awesome.
Very relaxing. We also, earlier this year in January, we got to go to Disney World. We saved for this trip for like a year because, Disney's crazy expensive. But it was so much fun. I had never been before, and Drew and I are very, how do I say it? We don't spend money at a lot of places, but maybe the movies and then vacations. We buy off-brand everything, and we're very simple because we want to spend all our money traveling. Because we feel like you can't have everything, but you can do anything. And so one of those things for us is so we got to do that earlier this year at Disney, and it was just the best. We were like 7-year-olds running around for a week. It was so much fun.
I had been before, didn't meet Kelsey until I was 18. We're 28 years old now. But taking Kelsey to Disney World was kind of like a glimpse, a sneak peek at what she was like as an 8-year-old. It was really, really, really special. We love traveling. People always ask us if we have kids, and our answer is yeah, we have about 60 of them. They're in our youth group. But we don't have any biological children of our own, although we do have some dogs.
Yes, these are our dogs. This is Albus. He's half lab, half pit bull, and he is the most anxious dog you'll ever meet, but he's also the sweetest, and he's a pack dog. Like, he's probably not doing too good at home without us right now. And then this is our puppy. So Albus is about 6 years old. And then our puppy, his name is Bruno, and he's a Great Dane puppy because I've always wanted just this huge monster dog to snuggle with. And so we love him, but he is teething right now, and we just got a text from our dog sitter that he was chewing on a bookcase. So
that was custom made by Kelsey's brother.
Not thrilled about that, but we still love him. He's still cute.
So that's kind of who we are. That's a little bit of who we are. But this is a two-way street. Some of you we have met, some of you we have not met. So if you would indulge us, we also want to get to know y'all. If y'all all would just shout your name at us on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Truly.
So nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
We will remember. All those names. We really like whenever we're talking to teens or speaking in general, we like to have an involved group of people that we're talking with. So feel free to giggle, feel free to interact with us, because kind of what we base the ministry work that we do is off of 2 things, is have fun and be real. And that's just kind of what we're about. That's what our lives are about. We feel like that's kind of what Jesus was about. And so that's what we're going to be doing all weekend long. Have fun, be real. Everything we do is going to fall under that.
All weekend we're going to be talking about the whole idea of relationships. And like we said earlier, our focus, the stance we come from, is usually at a direction to teenagers. And so we're excited to broaden that a little bit to relationships in general. So know as we talk, we're talking from a stance of romance and dating and marriage. But we also think what we have to say can be applicable to any and all relationships. Your friends, your co-workers, some of your grandparents and your grandchildren. A lot of these principles and values can go across multiple relationships, not just romantic.
And tonight, we're going to be talking about the differences between male and female. So that's why the class is titled Guys and Girls. We have little handouts for you to fill along blanks as we go along. Feel free to take extra notes, whatever. We're excited to be talking about all of that today. You ready?
Yeah, let's do
Okay.
it.
So guys and girls are different. If you've been alive for any length of time, you've probably noticed that. There's a lot of differences between guys and girls. And we're going to be talking just about a few of them. And some of the things that we're going to be saying, some of the examples, might be generalizations. You know, not every single guy is like this. Not every single girl is like this. But for the most part, all of our content for tonight comes from the Bible. It comes from our experience in ministry, our experience in marriage. Even though it's only 7 years, it's more than 0 years. And so we're excited to kind of share just what we've learned and from our education and everything. So a lot of what we'll be talking about tonight is all the different ways that guys and girls are different from each other.
In Genesis, it says God created them male and female. Adam from the dust of the earth and Eve from the rib of Adam. And he created them male and female, distinctly different. The world today is so... we believe that men and women should be respected equally. I think if me and Kelsey are doing the exact same job, we should be paid equally. But the agenda of the world today is pushing, we believe, gender roles so much so that it's almost like men and women should be able to be equal in everything. That a man should be able to be anything and everything that a woman is. And then a woman should be able to be anything and everything that a man is. And what we try to tell our teenagers is we should respect each other and love each other. But God created us distinctly different. Not that one is better than the other, and not that one should be respected less than the other, but they are distinctly different.
So one thing right now in our culture and society, which is great, is that society has kind of started paying attention to women past our appearances, which is really nice because we're starting to get noticed for, athletic ability or our brains and our education, which is great. But what we want to be mindful of is not taking that so far as to say, okay, now girls have to do every single thing like guys do. You have to just be the same in everything because like Drew just said, that's not how we were created. Like God intentionally made us different. There's a picture I really love. It's of this lion. It says, the lioness doesn't try to be the lion. She embraces her role as the lioness. And that's true for Simba, and it's true for us. Like, you don't see Nala trying to be Simba, Simba trying to be Nala. Like, they have their different roles. They have their different qualities and their strengths. And women weren't designed to be everything a man can be and do everything a man can do. Women were designed to do all the things men can't do. Because God blessed us with different gifts. God gave me gifts that he didn't give Drew, and vice versa. And so there's a lot of ways that because of that, we make such a good team. That's why husbands and wives as teams make such good work for the kingdom. And that's kind of what we're excited about and passionate about, because even though we're very different, God did that on purpose. Like, everything he does is intentional. It's not like he was like, we'll try this. Like, he planned it that way for a lot of good reasons. So we just kind of want to lay that as the foundation. And kind of this whole class will be pretty foundational for all the things that we'll be talking about tomorrow as well.
So if we're going to talk about relationships, we have to first start with the foundation that we're very different, and it's a very good thing. We're going to talk about dating, and we're talking about marriage, and we're talking about sex, and we're talking about integrating us in any way. We have to first come to the realization that we are different, and that is a very good thing. So we want to start off by talking about some humorous differences. It's okay to giggle along or shout amen if you feel like you need to. But we think there are big differences between guys and girls when okay. God created us to be different. That's the first fill in the blank. I missed that a second ago.
The entire time that we were practicing this, we always forgot this slide. So if you want to fill that in on your sheets, there it is.
I was supposed to click that earlier, but here we are. So we believe there are lots of differences between guys and girls. We think a big one is not necessarily, well, sometimes how we go to the bathroom, but how we go to the bathroom.
Yeah, trips to the bathroom. Because girls, it's kind of a thing where it's almost like a social event. I mean, obviously it's safety in numbers, but it's also like, hey, I'm going to the bathroom. Do you want to come? Yeah, sure, I want to go. Does anybody else want to go? Yeah, let's go. And then everyone goes to the bathroom in a herd, and we visit and talk and chat the whole time. And that's not something that you see guys doing.
Like, I haven't been everywhere, but I'm 28 years old, and I have never heard another grown man say, hey, gentlemen, I'm going to the bathroom. Would anyone like to accompany me? Like, it hadn't happened yet. And usually, when guys are in the restroom, it's like, oh, hey, man. And that's it. I'm not going to have a conversation. It's not a social outing. You do your thing, I'll do my thing, we'll talk outside.
So another thing is just in general of how our own showers look. This is very much what it looks like for us at home. And obviously our world is going to, target women for a lot of beauty products and stuff. But even so, like, women typically have more hair than men, right? And so obviously I need to shampoo and condition my hair. And then sometimes I'm going to shave or exfoliate or take my makeup off and do a face mask. Like, I've got lots of stuff in my shower. Not so much with Drew.
If you're like me, gentlemen, I only need a bottle of Suave 3-in-1. That's it. It's like $2.99 at Walmart. Super efficient, easy, affordable. I get in the shower, I get out. One of my best friends, who is a guy, has a shower like the picture on the right. Love him to death, but he has all the different products, and I don't get it. So, like we said, these are generalizations. Some girls may say, you know what, I also really like that bottle of 3-in-1. And if you're one of those girls, that's okay.
So we want to, we want to explain, that's the funny stuff, but we're going to get into a little bit of the psychological side of things now. So if psychology interests you, that is something that really interests me. And there's this visual that I learned a while back that's been very helpful for learning how guys and girls' brains operate. So whenever you think about how guys and girls are different in terms of how our brains work, I want you to think of guys are waffles and girls are spaghetti.
And those are fill in the blanks.
Those are
the
fill in the
underlying
blanks.
are fill in the blank.
Guys are waffles, girls are spaghetti. So if you look at this waffle, you see all the deep little pockets that the butter and the syrup can just ooey gooey drizzle over. I want y'all to remember the imagery of a waffle when you think of guys' brains, because guys' brains are like boxes, okay? Those little boxes and pockets. Whenever a guy is at work, he is in that box. That's what he's thinking about, that's what he's doing, he's in that box. Whenever he is at a sporting event, he is in that box. He is watching his kids play sports. That's what he's doing. There's not any crossover. So for guys, waffles. For girls, spaghetti, because everything is connected. You can't see where one piece of spaghetti starts and the other ends, and that's how girls' brains work. Because everything's connected. All the emotions, all the thoughts, all the feelings, all the situations. We can be at the sporting event and also be at 3 other places in our head, and that's not something the guys do. We can be at work and also be thinking about all the different things that we need to do when we get home, and we need to, I need to bake that pie for so-and-so, and I need to do this to-do list, and it's just constant. Emotions, too. That's why girls can be really happy and really sad at the same time, all the time. Like, why girls are constantly overwhelmed with everything. Like, have you ever been laying in bed at night and just cannot turn your brain off? Like, that can happen to guys, too. Sure, not saying it can't. But girls, that's a common thing for us because we just can't stop the connection because it's constant and it's going all the time.
And guys, on the other side of the table, think about one thing at a time. So if I'm outside mowing the grass, that's the box I'm in. Sometimes when I'm mowing the grass, I'll listen to an audiobook in my headphones. So then now I'm multitasking, which is already kind of pushing it from my box brain. And if I'm mowing and Kelsey opens the door and says, "Hey Drew, what do you want for dinner?" That's cool. I can jump over in the food box literally at any time during the day, or if I'm asleep. I'm about food. But if she says, "Hey Drew, how much money do we have to go towards our student loan bill for this month?" I'm like, okay, I'm not in the finances box right now. I'm in the mowing the grass. Or if I play video games a lot. I'm playing with the teens in our youth group, and I'm playing with my brother. And so if I'm playing Call of Duty, and Kelsey taps me on the shoulder and says, "Hey, where do you want to go on vacation later this year?" I'm not in the vacation planning box. I'm in the video game box. And so it's good for guys to know. See, we can push those boundaries sometimes. And it's good for ladies to know that guys sometimes really do just have a one-track mind. This is really good for guys because guys can focus on one thing at a time. That makes them very efficient at their work. That makes them very invested in their families. If dad is home from work and what I'm doing, I'm in the hanging out with my children box, my goodness, they can go to work on some relationships with their families, and that's awesome. But different than girls.
Yeah. Well, and one area that guys tend to struggle is with the prioritizing those boxes. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do. Because I love Kelsey, and I respect Kelsey.
He does.
But I do this thing, we've been married 7 years and I haven't stopped doing it. I do this thing where she's talking to me, I'll listen, and then I think, I can listen and then also reply to a text at the same time. I'm really skilled at multitasking, and then about 2 lines into the sentence I'm going, okay, I can't do this. Or if I don't catch it, she catches it, and she's like, all right, I'll wait. I can't multitask. And so I got to prioritize. This is nowhere near as important as what my wife has to say. And like I said, I'm not skilled at that, but it's an ongoing class I am in.
And just like that, like guys probably have a lot more trouble prioritizing their boxes. The struggle for girls, it's funny because both have to do with distraction, but in different ways. So guys, they get caught up in not prioritizing their boxes, and girls get caught up in not being where their feet are, They're so overwhelmed with all the thoughts and all the feelings and all the everything that it distracts us. And we need to remember, girls, like women, be where your feet are. Like, be invested in what's going on right now. All of that can wait. Like, it's no wonder that women are notorious for being warriors, right? It's because everything's connected. We're all always thinking about everything. Am I a good mom? Did I do a good wife thing today? Like, are my kids going to grow up to be good Christians? Like, all that kind of stuff, you're constantly thinking about it. But instead of thinking so much about it, just be in it. And that's kind of what we want to encourage both guys and girls to do. Because even though we're different, we end up struggling with a lot of the same things, too. It's interesting.
Still in the realm of how guys and girls think, but changing gears a little bit. Next fill in the blank is guys think of themselves better than they actually are, and girls tend to think of themselves worse than they actually are. Again, generalizations. Some guys may struggle with self-esteem, and some girls may be super confident in themselves, and if that's you, I hope that's a good thing.
And also, just want to say, like, our goal this whole weekend is to encourage you. So if we step on your toes, know that we're stepping on our own toes too. But that's our main goal through this whole thing is we want to encourage y'all. Because we feel like that's the best way to learn is by being encouraged, not by being scolded.
Yeah. We do have a funny picture to go along with this. The idea that guys have bigger heads and girls have smaller. You've got this picture of a beautiful young woman, but when she looks at herself in the mirror, she sees, oh, I'm so much bigger than I actually am. And then the guy in the mirror, he looks like, an Olympic swimmer, like Michael Phelps. But in reality, he's a beanpole. Guys tend to think of themselves better physically, but also mentally, and then the same thing with girls.
And we see this all the time in our teenagers too, especially in their sports. They do a lot of extracurricular activities, and it's just interesting to notice because the girls, you can tell if they're feeling confident, if they're feeling good in their abilities, they do better. But it falls the minute they start doubting themselves. The minute that they start, they make a mistake, and it's like, oh no, and then they make another mistake, and it just kind of spirals from there. And for guys, it's interesting because they have that confidence to make the touchdown, but that confidence sometimes carries them too far, gets them a flag for unsportsmanlike conduct because they're celebrating so much because they think they won the Super Bowl, but no, it's just a 3A football game. Like, it's okay. And so it's that kind of balance between guys need to simmer down a little bit, girls need to grow a little bit. And so this whole topic of self-esteem, we kind of have, this is silly, this is fun, but we do have a scripture to kind of base off of. It's from Romans 12:2. And it's when they're talking about offering your body as a living sacrifice. And in order to do that, we have to transform by renewing our minds. This is a constant thing for Christians. We should constantly be learning. And we believe that. Drew and I feel like if we're going to be good teachers, we have to always be learning. And so we always have to be on our own selves because we're responsible for our own actions. We're responsible for our own growth and following the Lord. And so renewing our minds within self-esteem, we need to encourage women, hey, be confident in yourself. Start believing in yourself again. And for men, it's like, hey, take a note of humility. Notice the picture we showed earlier of the girl and the guy looking in the mirror.
We see this in sports in our teenagers. We see this in marriages a lot. And a good example of how we see this are with two scriptures that we think sometimes go out of hand.
So for the women, it's this scripture. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. This is a great scripture, but we feel like a lot of times women will take that to the extreme. And they'll say, well, I don't ever have to worry about being prideful because I know I'm kind of like the worst person in the world. And I know that I'm not cute and I'm unattractive and I'm not good at my job. And on and on. If you're a woman, I hear women all the time talking to themselves like that, talking about themselves like that. That's not humility. And in fact, and a lot of people make the argument that that's just another form of pride because you're always focused on self. Because this verse isn't about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less often. And so that's kind of what I want to challenge and encourage women to do is don't beat yourself up all the time. God says you're his masterpiece. Don't let the fact that you think worse of yourself hold you back from the work that he's wanting you to do as a wife, as a mom, as a Christian, anything like that.
I think the verse that applies to me in my mind about men who tend to think of themselves better than they actually are is Ephesians 5:22. Wives, submit to your husbands as submitting to the Lord. I've grown up in the church my entire life, and I've seen a lot of husbands dangle that verse over their wife's head. Not literally, they don't say it to them, but you see it in their body language and how they talk to the wife. I heard a speaker say a while back, that verse is for every wife to memorize and every husband to never bring up. Because I think the verse that me as a husband, who is actively trying to find humility every day and think of myself how I am, not better than I should be, then I got to focus on the one that comes a few verses after this, where he says, and husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. I think we should be dangling that verse over our own heads and serving. Hey, how's it going?
So it's interesting to see these differences because they're both about esteem, and they're both things that God designed us, these directions, but he designed it so that we could make a good team whenever we come together.
The more Kelsey and I are married, the more we talk to teenagers, the more, honestly, that we're just on planet Earth, we realize that good communication is so important for healthy relationships. Whether you're married, whether you're dating, whether you're friends at the office, like a majority of the issues and problems we see all go back to poor communication.
So true.
So many marital problems go back to poor communication. So many issues. It's just, you need to communicate better.
And it's crazy because communication it's so broad. Like, it's important because it is so broad. Because it's not just what you say, it's how you say it, when you say it, why you say it, how you say it. Like, it's all of these things. And it's funny because, like, we've always been decent at communicating with each other, but we're always finding ways in which we need to communicate better with each other. And some of you may be able to relate to that because it may not be like, you may be really skilled at communicating about your schedules. Like, okay, we've got this going on this week, we need to be on the same page. But you may not be very skilled at, I'm feeling really stressed out right now and I need to talk about these feelings. Like, that might not be as easy for you. Or it could just be an argument thing when you're fighting or arguing with someone that you love, which is going to happen because humans are imperfect. If you're a cold shoulder kind of person where you don't want to talk about the issue, or if you do want to talk about the issue and you're going to give them an earful every single time, this is all about communication. And so something that has been very helpful for us, and it's a tool that we want to pass on to y'all, is this idea of I statements.
I want Kelsey to talk about this, but first I would like to say Kelsey has her bachelor's in psychology and a master's degree in counseling. And this was one thing she picked up in her education. And she brought it home and said, hey, I think maybe we should try this. Maybe we should implement this into our relationship. And it has totally changed the way we communicate. It helps us communicate much more healthily. So I'll let her talk about it.
Well, and also just saying about that real quick, that's also a difference in guys and girls because typically, not always, but typically the women are the ones who are going to want to work on things. They're more motivated. And the guys are like, nothing, everything's great. What are you talking about? Like,
it's not broke, don't fix it, all right?
Don't fix it. And so this is just an interesting thing too because typically, just from my own experience and education, guys are the ones who are a lot more resistant to go to see a therapist, like to go to counseling. And we kind of want to bust that wide open and say there's no shame in therapy. We go to therapy all the time because it's a proactive thing. It doesn't have to be we're in danger, so now we're going to go. It's like, no, let's just go. That's one way you can bless your marriage is by being proactive and saying, hey, for our anniversary this year, what if we sign up for a few counseling sessions just to work on our relationship?
Which sounds weird, especially because of the reputation that counseling has had for so long. Kelsey and I have an incredibly healthy relationship. Been married for 7 years, and we've seen 3 different counselors in 7 years. Not because our marriage was in flames, not because I was beating her, but because, you know what? We could make this thing better if we had someone who was educated to help us, and it worked every single time. I haven't regretted going to counseling once.
And that's kind of our demeanor is, why not? Why not go to therapy? And I statements is something that we use all the time. So I kind of want to educate y'all on how to use them so that way you can use them with your spouses, you can use them with your kids, you can use them with your parents and your family members, whoever. So basically, it's a way to accept responsibility for how you're feeling without pushing blame on somebody else. Because if you have this sheet, they're kind of highlighted out for you. Y'all can snag these later if you don't have one. But it sounds really different to say, you make me angry because you're always late. An I statement takes responsibility for your feelings. So you're saying, I feel frustrated when you come home late without calling because I stay up worrying. Do you see how they say the same thing, but in totally different ways? So that's something that Drew and I do a lot, and this is the formula, always. Like for an I statement, I feel, state the emotion, when you state the situation, because, and then you state why you feel the way that you feel. And that opens up a conversation instead of an argument, because you're not starting a conversation by pointing a finger at somebody else. So, like I might say, hey, I feel unloved when we don't spend time together because spending time together is important to me. And so that's my I statement. And this is the tricky part with I statements, is once you say it, it's helpful for the other person to restate it back to you. That way you know you're on the same page. So, on the spot, you want to say that back to me?
You feel unloved when we don't spend time together because it makes you feel like I don't want to spend time with you. Is that what I'm saying correctly?
Yes, that's good. Because I feel most loved when we get to spend quality time together. And so then the conversation can kind of go from there. So that's something we want to encourage y'all to implement within your families and your marriages and even your church family. Like even in the eldership meetings when y'all meet together, if y'all are in some kind of heated discussion, like whip out some I statements. And it's a way that can help you navigate through conversations and it lead to a fruitful place.
It is cool because over the past, I don't know when we started doing this, early on in our marriage, instead of saying, hey, I've got a bone to pick with you, or hey, you did this again, what we do now is I'll say, hey, I've got an I statement for you. And she's kind of like, okay, I'm ready. And like we can enter into a conversation without all the heat, without all the emotion, and with respect, and like, okay, I'm ready to hear what you have to say, and then we can go forward.
And something else that's really beautiful about I statements is, yes, it's a way to have hard conversations, but you can also use these to make positive statements, because that's something else that relationships need. Like, we need to be affirming one another and saying like, hey, I feel appreciated when you give me a hug at the end of the day because it makes me feel like I matter. Or when you tell your kids like, hey, I feel so appreciated when you pick up your clothes because then I don't have to come after you and do it. Like you can use I statements with your kids in a positive way too. And it's just something that can be really beneficial for any kind of relationship, not just romantic.
Another difference we see between guys and girls, there are so many. We're going to hit a few. But one, probably the biggest difference that we see today between guys and girls has to do with power. Usually when we talk about power, you're thinking about, okay, so like guys are more muscular than girls, or there's more men in the military than there are girls, or guys have stronger bones than girls. That's all I'm talking about. Guys have more social power than girls. Guys have more ability to command a room. Guys have more ability to hold eye contact. Guys have more ability to instantly get respect from whoever they're talking to. Social power, once you see it, it's everywhere. It's in race, it's in gender, it's in job title, it's in families, it's in churches, and one of the biggest ones we see is power between guys and girls.
So we talk with our teens a lot. Obviously, that's our strong suit, so that's what we wear when we talk about power. Because we're trying to educate them too, right? We're trying to tell them, educate them about power so that when they're 28 or when they're 68, they have a different handle on how to navigate it than maybe what we were given or maybe what y'all were given. And so what we say is like, okay, so power dynamics, let's talk about power. Let's admit that it's there, because it is. Let's not ignore it. So where do y'all see power? And our teens will say things like, oh, well, at school, it's seniors have more power than freshmen, obviously, right? Or maybe it's, oh, the jocks have more power than, say, the band crew, okay? Or maybe the super hot people have a lot more power than the not as attractive people. They see it, and, they're 13, 15, 18 years old. And so I think that's kind of the thing we want to focus a lot on for tonight, is just talking about this kind of power, admitting that it's there, and seeing what we can do to use that to our advantage to better our relationships with one another in the church setting. Because like we said, it's everywhere. It's not just at school for high schoolers. It's at church. It's in your families. It's in your jobs. And so let's talk about it.
I think another extreme case, and I don't really want to get over on race, but I'm going to get over on race. There's huge power dynamics within, whether you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever. White is at the top of the food chain. Should not be. We should all be equal. But white is at the top of the food chain. And within that, I mean, anyway, it doesn't matter. We won't get off on race. What I want to say instead, sorry, I got off. Kelsey and I speak a lot to our teenagers and children, and they love Kelsey. Who wouldn't? They respect Kelsey. They know she is invested in their souls. She has a deep relationship with every one of the kids in our youth group. They're crazy about it. But even with that, it's interesting watching the power dynamic sometimes. I'm the youth minister, and she's the youth minister's wife. But, I mean, y'all know, a lot of times the youth minister's wife is also like a bonus youth minister. And so she teaches with me a lot. And it's interesting, even though these kids love her, even though these kids respect her so much, even though she is more educated than me, she has a master's degree. I stopped at a bachelor's and said, peace. But whenever I'm talking, I can say the exact same thing, with the exact same tone, with the exact same inflection, and because I'm tall and white and a man, I can hold their attention a lot longer than Kelsey. A couple of months ago, it happens every now and then with our teens and children, where, not often, maybe once a year, maybe. But a while back, I was talking and they were listening, and I don't remember what I was saying, and then Kelsey had a little bit like we're doing now, where we go back and forth, and she was talking, and I just kind of watched, kind of just sat back, and heads started nodding, they started turning over, talking to each other, and pulling out their phones, and doing their thing, and I just kind of stopped and said, hey, let's listen to Kelsey. She has something valuable to say here. Don't just check out because she's a woman. And they were kind of like, oh, not bad, you know? But that just goes to show the power dynamic is so there, and we believe we can't ignore it. We can't turn a blind eye and just assume, especially if we're white, because we believe the best thing to do is see that the power dynamic is there, notice it, and give it away as much as possible.
And I think it surprises, like our teens, what he was saying, it surprised them. Like they don't even realize. But it's just something that our culture and society is so ingrained just from a young age to pay attention to the tall, dark, and handsome man that's talking, you know? And so it's just something that we want to admit that's there. And we will be happy to tell you that we are not perfect, like so far from it. We get things wrong all the time. Like I said earlier, we think that good teachers are people who are constantly learning, and so we're always pushing ourselves to learn. But we also really want to admit when we mess up and admit when we don't do a good job of things. And so we have a small story of this example. Like I said earlier, I love to read, and there's a book that I love. It's called The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. It's on this list. And it's a book that I told Drew, I was like, hey, I know the reading's not really your thing, but there's this one chapter you've got to read. I know you're going to love it. Check out this one chapter of this book.
So I read this chapter. It was about the spirit of play and how it helps the development of children. Everybody knows kids ages 10 and younger have to play. They got to have the kickball in the schoolyard. They got to have playing football in the front yard with dad. They have to play. It's so important for their brain and their social skills and everything to develop. And then when we get to junior high and high school, we kind of all assume, oh, well, they're on the football team now, they play volleyball, that's play. Really, it's not, because of how much pressure coaches put on, because of how much pressure social media puts on, and although we as parents don't always intend to, we put a lot of pressure on our kids to perform well as well. And so for a lot of teenagers, what we're hearing is it doesn't feel like play. It feels like kind of play and also something else entirely. And so, anyway, read this chapter on play, loved it, and I tried to post on Facebook to kind of get the message out to the parents in our youth group. And play is so important for your teenagers. Make sure they're not just playing Fortnite for 12 hours. Make sure they're not just staring at their phone all the time. Get out and do something fun with your kids. And so I get my there's the picture of the book. We're going to tap into this book, and I screenshot a picture of the quote I want to use. I type up my little message of what I want to say on Facebook to encourage people. And then I turned to Kelsey, and I said, hey, I'm going to post about Dr. Brown's quote from this book. What's his first name? And she said, what? I said, yeah, what's Dr. Brown's first name? What's his name? And she said, her name is Brenham.
I didn't say that sassy.
It felt that sassy. And I will just first say, I'm all for girl power. Like, I am all for female success. I'm the biggest cheerleader of Kelsey or any of the girls in our youth group. Any of you women doing anything, you go, girl. But that just goes to show how ingrained it is in my brain, the society I've been raised in, of the church I've been raised in, of the family I've been raised in, that I see PhD in Dr. Brown, and I just assume it's a man. Because men, somewhere in my brain, should be more educated than women. And that's just so not true. And I'm so for women. So it really was kind of a slap in my own face of the power that I am trying to put away, but is somewhere in there still.
So this is kind of all the things that we want to encourage y'all to be thinking about, because there are a lot of differences between guys and girls, from how we communicate to self-esteem to things like power, like what we were just talking about. And so what we want to do is encourage y'all as family systems, as a church family, as leaders in the community, to start noticing where these differences are, and don't see them as a bad thing, because they're not. Like we said earlier, God designed us to be different from each other. It's meant to be a good thing. And so because of that, what can we do? How can we use these differences to make our family better? And by family, I don't just mean your family that's under your household. I mean this family that's in this room right now. How can we use these differences to be good teammates to each other?
We believe that in the beginning, when God created them, Adam and Eve, I think that was one of the best teams ever created. And I know we can go on and say, well, Eve listened to the serpent, whatever, because Satan does his thing. But when a man and a wife can acknowledge that they are different, and made different, and separate but equal, one is not better than the other, I think we can do some pretty incredible things when we work together in that way.
Yeah.
We have figured out that, and every relationship is different. For yours, it may be vastly different, and that's okay. But for us, it seems to work really well.
Yeah. And we kind of have a final scripture to share with y'all to kind of wrap this all together, because we think Colossians 3:15 sums up the differences well. Like, let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you were called to peace, and be thankful. And kind of the question we want to challenge you with as an individual, as a church family, is what is ruling your heart? Because if it's not the peace of Christ, it needs to be. Because that's what's going to lead us towards these healthy relationships, is by letting Christ be in charge, by letting God be the one that's calling the shots, and that you're following the steps he's laying out for you. So is that kind of where you want to leave this?
Yeah.
Kind of encourage them with that?
I think so. This weekend we're going to talk about, tomorrow we'll talk about families of faith, and then tomorrow after lunch, Kelsey and I will talk about healthy relationships, some practices and some virtues to strive for that we think, again, are impactful and good for romantic relationships, but also for any. But what we don't want to do is just say, all right, we're done, let's pray and wrap it up. What we really like doing is discussing together and, what's the word I'm looking for? Digesting. Reflecting.
We like, because kind of what we do with our church family and Childress is we like to start conversations. Because it's one thing to sit and listen, but if we can start like dialogue about stuff, it's not only going to help you remember it, but it's also going to motivate you to actually follow through with some of the things that we've talked about. And so that's kind of what we want to do right now, is have this little moment of reflection. So we've talked a lot. We love feedback, even if
you disagree, that's
even
cool.
if you disagree, that's okay.
Still love each other.
It might be uncomfortable, because I know in churches sometimes like, wait, are we supposed supposed to talk. I don't want to talk. I really don't want to say anything. But we want to open up the floor to hear a little bit back from y'all. So our first question, and you can think about it for a little bit if you need to, but our first question is, what information did you find helpful? And you can shout it out, you can raise your hand, whatever, but what's something that you found helpful?
Especially the I statements. I mean, that's a good way to, like you were saying, is I feel, or can I share an I statement with you, rather than just jumping right into it with catching your spouse off guard. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that always works better than always or never statements.
Yes.
I've learned also don't use absolutes
Right.
Yeah.
whenever
Yeah.
you're trying to get your point across.
Right.
As a school teacher myself, I just kind of look at, because I teach 9th and 10th grade.
Okay.
So I'm right there with y'all.
Oh, yeah.
Just looking at the kind of love they need, because they're being molded as you speak to them.
That's true.
And just giving them the opportunity to share their peace of mind and give them a better chance to explain where they're coming from. Because I mean, I teach more at we're not officially a Title I school, but Title I school is you got 40% or more of your students with free reduced lunch. So, and we got at-risk students. So at-risk could mean anything from being one parent or guardian being incarcerated to another just being poor in that sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
Nice. That's good. What else?
Well, I think the I statement, the formula for the I statement that you provided is a good way to help you frame it. And also the I statement, I think it's important, you can use it for saying what kind of behavior makes you feel bad, but also what makes you feel good. And I also think it's powerful because instead of saying that makes me feel bad, it says why and how it makes you feel, rather than just that I don't like it.
Right. Helps you express a little bit more. That's good. What else?
I like the be where your feet are. My brain is always, I've never thought of it as like planting yourself in the moment.
Yeah.
Maybe for like 30 seconds, but not consistently. So I like that. 'Cause now I know I need to be more intentional about making my brain be still. So I like that.
Would you say that guys are more, at least from my standpoint, I think I'm a more linear person. Being a math teacher also, I've got to think logically about things. I mean, you've got your master's in psychology, right? Or counseling. So what's your take on that?
I think that that's not necessarily a guy-girl thing, but I do think that there are a lot of situations in which guys tend to be more of the logical or just the facts, and girls tend to be all the details and in between spaces, you know. But I don't think that that's exclusive to guys, girls. That might also just be more of individual gifts and talents and where your brain's at too.
I think, two things. One, I think that guys are more solution oriented typically.
They just want to fix it. And girls are like, I
and
want
they're
you to
looking
fix
for the solution. And in some ways that makes it seem more linear because a lot of times that.
Definitely.
But I also think that on a very basic level, a big difference between men and women is men have a basic innate tendency to be a protector and a provider, and women have a tendency to be a nurturer. And so many of our differences kind of build from those two differences.
Absolutely. So true.
And including when you talk about power dynamics, because lawyer type of wanting to come in and women more relational and nurturing in their approach.
What other things? What other information did you find helpful?
Going back, staying on this I statement thing, I wish I had known this when I was raising my children, because I think it'd be a good way to communicate with children. And I may have missed it because I don't hear that seemed like it was mostly directed at husbands and wives.
Sure.
But I see a very good deal here to your child, you could say,
Definitely.
and why.
Absolutely.
To get them to think rather than to just get mad and stomp off somewhere.
Right, and instead of the because I said so, you can say, no, because I'm exhausted and you stayed up all night, so it kept me up all night. So like, you can actually have some kind of conversation to help educate them too, yeah. We tend to speak from a husband-wife just because that's where our lives are, but absolutely, I statements are applicable for any kind of relationship, even just like co-working relationships. So super helpful tool. Great discussion, by the way.
I was gonna say, reaffirming on the counseling thing, in our previous conversation, we took like a 200 question quiz separate from each other. And then we went in every Wednesday and we talked to a counselor. He knew how we had both responded to these 200 questions and had did like a whole analysis, but we had to go through and talk about why did you answer that way, why did you answer that way, and it was a good way of looking at different perspectives and how we were raised or why, we thought differently about different situations. We didn't get to finish the class because he left to Oklahoma, but it was good while it lasted.
Yeah.
That sounds really
That
cool.
sounds really
But,
cool.
yeah, it was a really neat program that the church had done.
That's cool.
We
Love that
we
kind of
should do
stuff. I
that.
know, we should do
Sounds
that.
awesome.
We
It's
should.
called Enrich, we still did their emails.
I've heard of that. Okay, cool.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I know y'all are probably gonna cover this, but, at least in my experience, a lot of the problems in relationships have to do with unspoken expectations.
Definitely.
Even as simple as what I mean by a clean room, and what you mean by a clean room can be totally different.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, and even just just communication in general, because probably about half our arguments, we realize we're saying the same thing, but we're saying it in two different ways. We're like, wait, we are on the same page. But yes, how people define whatever the conversation's about is huge, very huge.
And how you say something.
Yes, yeah, that's
You
it,
could be being
communication.
a benign statement, and he's infuriated with me, and I'm like,
Well, and especially nowadays through technology, you can't sense tone
That's
as
right.
much to inflection, so that can be tricky to navigate. So
And I don't know how the other men in the room are, but I always have to watch my tone with Kelsey because I love you and yeah, I love you are two very different things, So
tone is
it's
everything.
tough. Let's go to question number 2, which is what was said that challenged you? Maybe you went, "Ugh," or now I have homework, or what challenged you?
Well, we're old, but I mean, you see that, but.
She's mature and I am very mature.
But this, I've heard this about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, but I just forgot it. I feel when you, because, and I'm falling, back into, name calling, you are such a dumbbell, or something. How stupid can you be, or, I'm bending here, y'all, just take it.
This is a safe place. Safe place. Don't judge.
And really,
I'm gonna fit those in.
and really, that is not true. And I can't believe I forgot that because it makes such a difference.
It does.
And not just to the listener, but more for me, I would say. I just feel calmer, there's no, really, it kind of takes the animosity out of the situation.
Definitely.
And, and if he doesn't respond right, I can still say, under my breath, you done voted.
Well, if you actually reminded me, you didn't
Listen to
necessarily
her comment,
cover
that's
this,
important.
but with men, men have a little trickier time processing emotion, and women are a little more natural at processing emotion. So girls are more likely to be up for talking about how they feel, which makes sense, because our culture, it's like, guys, like, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and rub some dirt in it and get over it, you know, but actually having these I statements can help process those emotions too and communicate, like, because you, like you said, you might be heated, but then you're like, okay, but how do I put this in an I statement? And it really helps you think of, like, why am I feeling this way? What is actually the situation that's happening right now? This isn't something from 10 years ago. This is right now, you know, and so that's something that can be helpful too.
And sometimes as you get older, well, mine does, memory, you know, it just, it goes and you forget things like that. And when you said this, or I saw it, I thought, oh my gosh, I forgot about that, you know? Which is so simple, but yet, you know, it's so easy to jump at somebody,
Definitely.
or it is for me.
That's fair. What else? What challenged you?
Well, it's not really what challenged me, but what challenged you with the counseling sessions that y'all were talking about. You've seen 3 different counselors. What has changed your marriage and what has changed your relationship with each other?
Do you want to go first?
You better go first.
I'm the extrovert, and I tend to talk and figure out my sentence as I'm talking, and he's the introvert, who's like, I have to think about what it is.
Formulate.
So, what are some things that challenged us, changed us, helped us grow?
Right.
That's what you're asking. Okay. I would say just being open to the fact that we need to be constantly growing is like, that's, if we had to start with that. Because talking about unrealistic expectations, like, we need to have that baseline of knowing, like, I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, like, we might be good for each other, but neither of us is perfect. And so just the fact of having that home base of being open to receiving I statements, or open to, hey, let's go to counseling, let's talk through things. I think that was a good baseline of where to start for everything. You have something to add?
Yeah, sort of supporting Kelsey's answer. Whenever we were engaged, right before we got engaged, we asked each other, like, to kind of test each other's commitment levels. Hey, say we get married and X happens. Are you going to stay with me? Yeah. So we'll say we get married and Z happens. Are you going to stay with me? Just to kind of feel each other out, because we're in it for the long haul.
Only doing this one.
And these were crazy examples, like, it would never happen in a million years, but what if this? Would you stick around? We get married, and one of those things that would never happen in a million years happened. And that's a different story for a different day. But you either get refined or reduced by the fires of life. And it was a pretty hot fire. And that was part of the reason why we started going to counseling right out the gates, because it was like, we're going to grow together or grow apart. And we're going to grow together.
And I don't think we can be too specific on that, but just, it was one of those things that was totally out of either of our control, but one of those things where we knew that this is one of those things that, like, as a couple, you have to be in each other's corner. You
All the
can't,
way.
he can't run to his family for this, I can't run to my parents for this, like, it's something we've got to do together. And I think that was, yeah, probably sorry if I took over what you're saying.
I was just going to say that was kind of the fuel that got us to go to counseling. And that's where we learn to communicate through the frustration, because, you know, it's not about, oh, you didn't take out the trash. You know, it's you didn't take out the trash, and that makes me feel X, Y, Z. And simple things like that helped us through really, really difficult times.
But I will say too that, which some of this we'll get to tomorrow, but I think the perspective, so if you're here, you get a little sneak preview, but the perspective of being teammates has been fundamental for us. Thinking like we're on the same team. It's not him against me, it's not me against, like, this is a team. Like, what are we going to do as a team? How am I going to treat a teammate? You know, and I think that perspective, or thinking of each other as friends, not just husband, wife, not just grandparent, grandkid, but thinking of each other as people that you care about, not just like, oh, it's family and it's complicated, like, but thinking of it in terms of friendship. Like that's a big thing with Jesus, is being friends. And so I think that those are kind of some of the fundamental things that helped us to answer the question.
Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying. I'm just, I guess, how did communication play a major factor in sparking the fire to go to counseling, or was it just something else?
I would say communication played a major part, yeah.
Okay.
And just
What
the
would you say?
circumstances of knowing, just being on the same page with each other, which has to do with communication too.
Right.
But just knowing that we're both in this, and knowing that we're both up for counseling or whatever it is, hard conversations. I think that just knowing we're on the same page together. Yeah.
Anything else challenging? I'm sorry.
The things that have been said tonight have been more complex than my simplistic brain handles. But if my wife was like me, I would not love her like I do. And if I was like her, she would probably not love me.
That's so true.
So our differences are bring us together.
Absolutely.
Even though all my kids are grown and the last one just graduated, one of the things that I think I struggled with was the intentionality of everything. Like realizing in the moment that what you're doing in the relationship you have with your spouse is the example that your kids are gonna take away as the way they should interact with their spouse. Or maybe they're gonna go just the opposite and go, whoa, we wanna do just everything different than they did. But it's very important.
Definitely. Definitely important. Thank y'all so much for sharing. Awesome. Yes?
Just make a comment. We have grandkids, and so when I say something, you're talking about power dynamic. When I say, our voices are deeper, and so grandkids respond to that when they're little. If I say something that doesn't necessarily pass the smell test, they just look at Rhonda and go, "Is that right?" As they get older, you get used to it, and it doesn't hurt your feelings as much. You realize that.
Yes.
Trust but verify, I guess.
That's good.
I wanted to add one thing. I wrote down something that you said that kind of hit home with me. I'm a perfectionist. And so with us moving, lots of newness and figuring things out and starting a new job and all that kind of stuff. Philippians 2:3, after you read that, you said, don't beat yourself up. You were created by God. And that just kind of hit me, and I appreciate you saying that. I think when you said the waffles and spaghetti, that's us to a T. And I think sometimes our
I feel hurt
frustrations.
when you say this.
Because.
I was trying to do the ice thing, but you're more of a communicator.
No,
I'm a collector. I'm a little bread on the outside.
but that's us, and I think sometimes it's so good that he is a waffle, because when he is there, he is there. And a lot of times my brain is, we're in one conversation and I'm thinking about what Mackenzie's doing and what I need to be doing for school and what my mom's doing. I can do it all. And so being more intentional with kind of pulling my spaghetti noodles into his box sometimes, that kind of challenged me a little bit. So I appreciate all of that.
Anybody else before we wrap up?
Do we get to ask y'all questions?
If you
Sure.
would like to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if our answers will be good, but
Well, let's
Try.
give it a whirl.
So the giving tree is on here, and
Yeah.
I don't know if this is popular. I have
Oh my gosh, that like breaks my heart. That's one of my favorite books.
I love Shel Silverstein and Roald Dahl.
Like
all
from the
that.
tree.
A lot of people don't understand that book.
I
Like,
don't understand it. I'll read it to you tomorrow. We'll do it. We'll do it.
I mean, kids want me to read it to them like constantly, so it's in our house. I don't know, it seems like the boy just keeps taking and taking and taking, and there's no resolution at the end. It's just like the tree's gone, and the boy's like, peace out, I'm going to the other side of the world.
See you never.
I think that
Is there a deeper thing I'm missing?
I mean, I think that there's a lot of spiritual
It's a very
things that
last page.
can be taken from it. We wanted to include something on this list that would obviously be good for little ones, and kind of the lesson that we've used, because we also, I mean, we're working with teenagers, but we read them children's books all the time. And so for this one, I really like using this as an example of, one, teaching them to think outside of themselves, because he doesn't, you know? He's not ever thinking outside of himself and thinking about, you know, if the tree is the parent figure, think about your parents. And that's something we tell our teens is, okay, look, how many of you are the oldest kid in your family? Have them raise their hands and say, your parents, like, everything they're doing with you is the first time they've done it. Like, so trying to get them to see outside of themselves into somebody else's shoes a little bit, and trying to get them to see the perspective of the giving tree and what that is like, and also how it's a reflection of how God is with us, that he gives and gives and gives, even if we just take advantage of it, even if we just leave someday, you know. And I think that that's, at least for me, a couple of the lessons that I kind of take from it. I don't know if that hits or anything with you, but that's one. Other questions, Brett?
Love languages and Enneagrams, those two. Are those, do they fit together?
There's similarities, but not
I mean,
really.
they're definitely separate things. For example, I don't know if any of y'all are Enneagram people. I'm a 7 on the Enneagram and Drew's a 9. But our love languages, I don't know that they're necessarily like all 7s are, you know, quality time people. I don't know that there's necessarily that kind of connection. But we both love both of those things, because it's just one of those things that can help you understand your loved ones better. So that's kind of for us. You had something?
I've been sitting here listening to y'all.
Thank you.
And you started out,
Me too.
boys and girls are very different. Then you kind of stereotype boys and girls with the waffle and the spaghetti. What happens in your youth group if a guy doesn't exactly fall in that stereotype and a girl doesn't exactly? I'm not talking about sexually or anything like that.
Sure.
I'm talking about personality and opinions about things. How do you reach out to them in that way? And the first thing that comes up, you know, in West Texas is you have a nice big old boy, weighs about 180 pounds, and he's a junior, and he has 0 interest in football. You know, or something like that. That can get to be a real downer. I'm not like. So how do you address that after you present them with this kind of stuff?
In Childress, it's really easy to see that. I'm sure like most Texas towns, but in Childress, it's 2 hours from anywhere. And so you don't leave unless you're going somewhere, and no one ever does. And if you stay in town, you're either playing sports, playing video games, or asleep. And so like, you kind of you fall in those boxes. You're an athlete, you're in band, or you're something else. And the something else usually don't do very well. Should do just fine. And so what we try to do with our youth group is anything we do, anytime we go in the youth center, it's a safe place. Anyone is welcome. And we can say that all we want, but we can't say it's safe and it be that way. We say rattlesnakes are safe, but they're not, you know. We expect that is the standard for our youth group. And they hang on pretty good, but it is a minority, especially in the town of Childress.
And I will say, the thing, we're talking about relationships. Drew and I believe very much that you can't connect with that kid that might be an outlier if you're not willing to have have a relationship and meet them where they're at. Like, it's not about trying to force people into certain roles. It's about meeting someone where they're at, connecting with them. Because that's the thing, like, obviously we're talking about guys and girls, but the differences do not stop there, right? Like, there's differences in age and generations. There's differences in race, like Drew kind of talked about a little bit. There's differences in socioeconomic status. And so our whole thing is, hey, I'm going to connect with you and talk with you and love you and find out where your interests are and what you're into, and then I'm going to give that a whirl because I want to get to know you better, and I can't do that if I'm not interested in some of the things you're interested in. And I may not care about playing 2K, but if you care about it, I want to care about it. And so that's kind of our perspective with that, because it doesn't force kids into something. It's, we still want to build a relationship with you. We could care less if you get in the football game. We could care less if you want to be a cheerleader or not. We just like you. And I think that's the thing, is when all the labels, all the stereotypes are gone, that they're still worth getting to know. They're still a masterpiece. And kind of showing them through that by our actions, that's kind of how we approach those kinds of relationships.
There's an elder at the church we go to named Mike Henderson, and he said a quote years ago, probably y'all heard it as well, but he said, they won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that has totally changed the way we do ministry. Like Kelsey said, with relationships, that's how we win. And so we just try to sell love as much as possible.
No, in that sense, being a school teacher, I've got a lot more kids of the LGBTQ population. How do I connect with them? I mean, they've already made their mind up that they want to be non-binary,
Sure.
or they want to go they, them.
Mm-hmm.
How do I even, as from a Christian standpoint, how
Right.
do I even,
So,
they're basically polar opposites.
yeah. This is something that we've studied for probably the past 5 years. Like, we're just constantly learning more and more about this. So what we say now is what we've learned, where we're at with this point. 2 years from now, that it may shift a little, but where we're at now is ultimately how we feel about someone else's life choices is irrelevant. How we treat them is everything. That's kind of where we're at as far as what we know from the Bible and what we feel like God's leading us towards, is how we feel about everything doesn't matter. Me, trying to make a connection with them doesn't necessarily tell them I support them. It tells them I'm going to care about you regardless of the decisions you make, because we are all sinners. Like, none of us are perfect, and so I can't sit here and say that this teen that wants to be referred to as they, them is lesser than I am, And so that's kind of the perspective we take, is we're all sinners and we don't have all the answers, but I do know that God said love him and love people. And so I'm going to do my best to do those within my job as my ministry, within our church setting, under my household. Because at the end of the day, which I don't want to get too much into this, but psychologically, usually when students are struggling with this sort of thing, it's not necessarily, how do I say this? The nature-nurture concept, help me, what am I saying? Like,
Usually it's not just a life choice, like, oh, well, my thing is lying, my thing is going to be smoking weed, oh, my thing is I'm going to be gay or change my sex. It's incredibly, is where you're going?
Yeah.
Incredibly emotional and mental. Usually it's because of trauma at home at a young age.
or because of unhealthy relationships.
Or because of unhealthy relationships.
Yeah.
So, like, what we struggle with is, no, I don't agree with it. And Christians always use the word condone. Like, I love them, but I can't condone it. But if we don't treat them like humans, then we're not loving. And so, it's a double-edged sword. I don't know if I'm answering well either.
Very good. I think you are. I think the thing is, how do we show that love? And I think that's like, okay, well, let's look at stories in the Bible when Jesus loved someone that everybody else was like, stay away from them. What did he do? He ran towards them. He spent time with those people. If you want to love like Jesus loved, you're going to be spending time with a lot of weird people that you don't want to be around because you're uncomfortable. But that's exactly what he did for his short life on earth. I'm sweating a little bit, called to do. That even if it's uncomfortable, even if we get it wrong, because we will, and we'll just say like, I don't know how to do this, but I wanna care about you, and just be honest. Because I think that's something else that our teens respect a lot, is that we tell them all the time like, okay, I messed up here. Because adults don't like admitting that, right? We don't like telling our kids like, I snapped at you earlier, I'm sorry, that was wrong. But it's so healthy for them to hear it. And they'll know if you're genuine or not. And I think that's everything. Like we said, our thing is have fun and be real. And teens know if you're faking a relationship with them. And they know if you're being real. And so I think if your heart's in the right place, that it's gonna unfold genuinely, and that's what matters.
In my 26 years of education, I've had all sorts of different students and had to learn to accept all different kinds of people. And like you said, if you care about them and you show interest in them and in their education, they'll care about you.
Just do it.
You were the hardest.
I know I keep asking questions,
You're fine.
just wanting to know more. You both have different love languages, right?
Yes and no.
Yes.
Okay, so on the assumption you do, how do you compromise meeting each other's love language?
So I will say, we kind of both have two top love languages that separate from the rest of the pack, and one of them is the same, and that's quality time. And so that's easy for us. We're good at the quality time thing. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so my other one is, I kind of go between physical touch and words of affirmation. Quality touch, physical touch, I don't quite do. Quality time, physical touch, and words of affirmation all kind of teeter for me. They're all up there. Gifts and acts of service, they're not big for me. But gifts is Kelsey's second one. It's very high up there for her. And so while quality time is easy, just hang out, she's really good at getting me gifts, and I'm not skilled at giving her gifts, because that's all the way down the totem pole for me. And so I've had to be intentional. One thing, honestly, technology is such a curse, but it's also such a gift at the same time. Reminders on the iPhone are so clutch. I'll just say, remind me in a month to get Kelsey a Snickers.
He actually said a reminder.
And then I forget about it, she didn't even like Snickers. But then I'll see this in a month, and I'll go, oh yeah, I remember we did that in Brenham, and now I'm gonna go get Kelsey something. And so I've just had to be very intentional about meeting her need, because that's not how I feel love, but it is the way she feels love.
And also, like, just to throw this out there, if gifts is your love language, it's okay. Like, I know everyone's like, oh, materialism, but no, it's not about how much it is, it's about the thought behind the gift. So, I will say for Drew, like he said, words of affirmation, like, I'm not good at the words. I'm like, you know what, have you ever seen Mulan? Like, that movie when the guy's end is like, you fight good. Like, that's how he compliments, that's me when I'm like, the words. And so, something I do a lot, you fight good, is physical touch-wise, that's a little easier for me. And so I told Drew a while back, I said, hey, words are hard for me, but I want to show you love. And so what we came up with is I start, like if we're holding hands, like something I'll do is I'll just squeeze 3 times in a row as a way of telling him I love him. Because, and that way, so like, and I mean, he can attest to this, I'm like squeezing and patting him 3 times in a row all the time. And he's like, oh, I love you too. And he'll just say it back to me. And so just finding ways around it that work for both of you so that, again, communicating, you know kind of where it's coming from and what you're meaning, and using your own gifts to show someone else. Anyway, that's what it's best.
But Drew, you said you're introverted, so why you want to spend time?
Because I like her.
She's in your introverted bubble.
I am in the bubble.
I am an introvert. I teeter. I'm an extroverted introvert, but I'm still an introvert to where I need that alone time to recharge. And so what I'll do, video games is part of my solace, where I love you to death, but I've got to go be in my, I call it my nothing box. Like I'm in the waffle box where I'm not doing anything else, because I've got to emotionally recharge. And
Which
so,
is fine, because then I read something.
so, but that is something we had to talk about. Like I've got to have some me time.
Definitely. That's good. Y'all have been awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, y'all might
for
want to go to
listening.
sleep.
Yeah, I'm sure you're tired, everything.
Thank y'all so much for having us and for putting up with us. Yeah, you're doing great.
Thank you.
Should y'all be okay if I closed us in prayer?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Before he does, also just let you know, if you didn't pick one of these up, there should be plenty in the back for you to snag. Or if you just want to take a picture of it, that's fine too. Just want y'all to have those resources.
We will be back tomorrow morning. Thank y'all.
Yes.
Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you so much for this evening to talk about relationships and families and marriage. And we thank you so much for the way you created us, uniquely different, but we thank you for showing us how our differences really do connect like a puzzle piece so well together. Father, I thank you for Brenham Church of Christ, for the light they are for this community, for the good intentions they have to be a resource for each other. They could sharpen each other and grow closer to one another. We pray that you would bless this place. We pray that you would be with the individual families. We pray that you would be with this church family as a collective unit. We thank you so much for the influence they've been on us in a short amount of time. You are so good to us, far better than we deserve. We love you, and it's in your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.